Chapter 3: Cultures and Rationalities. Learning Outcomes. At the end of this chapter, the students should be able to discuss how culture or rationality shapes people's perception of reality, state the effects of culture on a person's perception of gender and sexuality, and explain how rationalities shape sexism and discrimination. Instinct and culture. Human beings, unlike animals, are not heavily dependent on instinct. Certainly, instinctual aspects are present in specific actions such as breathing, making sounds when surprised or shocked, upright walking, or choosing between fight or flight. More than these instinct driven actions, humans are distinct from other beings because they possess systems of meanings that tell what is right or wrong, and good or evil. Most of what people do is shaped or determined by these systems. For instance, procreation is an instinct, as there is a drive in people toward procreation. However, this urge takes different forms. A number of people want to have many children, while others want to have a few. Some people suppress the instinct for procreation altogether, such as members of religious orders. These decisions all depend on the meaning people give to procreation. Is the number of children about survival or happiness? Should one not have children at all because of certain lifestyle or existential considerations? These choices are shaped not by instinct but by a frame of understanding that determines a person's giving meaning to society. This frame of understanding is what Clifford Geertz calls culture. Culture is the system of symbols that allows people to give meaning to experience. It bears all the accumulated knowledge of people coded into symbol that will help them interpret what is happening or what is happening to or around them and how they can give an appropriate response to the experience. This system is necessary because when an event or phenomenon takes place, people need to respond to it in a way that is rational to them. The meaning of a stimulus and the kind of response appropriate to it depend on one's systems of understanding. Every person has internalized shortcuts for giving meaning and meaningful responses coding into the system, especially inherited culture. Culture provides people with systems of shortcuts for meaningful interpretations and responses. Because a culture is handed down through generations, everyone knows doctors cure you when you are sick, that profit is always good, that women raise children, and that men should set time aside to drink with their friends. These examples are ideas as we do not even think about but merely accept as true because culture has provided their meaning and the proper action with regard to them. This is what culture does. It takes the place of instinct to give people a quick representation and response based on collective experience to the things that confront them. Cultures can change. Culture is superior to instinct because it is malleable or adaptable. It is both learned and inherited and readily determines how one understands and acts. It also changes when its framing of reality is no longer useful. It is the main difference between culture and instinct. The system that shapes human behavior is malleable, unlike instinct, that is genetically coded and needs generations of mutation to be recoded. People in their lifetime can transform their culture and effectively reshape their being in the world. Just imagine how, in one generation, self promotion and publicizing the self, such as in social media websites like Facebook, have become acceptable behaviors. If it becomes necessary to become vegetarian, a person can choose it without having to reconfigure his or her DNA. Thus, culture is the versatile system of meaning giving. The problem in this setup, however, is that when cultural systems orient people to act in a certain way that is harmful, individuals tend to act destructively toward others without conscious decisions. If a community devalues women and oppresses them, people are almost always programmed by their cultural system to act this way. It can thus be said that treating women badly and women being receptive bad treatment are due to a cultural system. This thought is worrisome because it means that the unjust things we do are not the acts of our free will. On the other hand, it is hopeful because it means that we behave the way we do to, due to systems that can be changed. Thus, we can work together to change these systems. After all, the superiority of the system of culture versus instinct lies in the fact that culture can be transformed without waiting for genetic mutation or to take effect. Culture can change the system of meaning no longer serves human flourishing. We must understand how culture can be changed so that the world becomes more just to women. To illustrate this point, examine microaggression as a form of violence. Microaggression refers to hostile, derogatory, or negative slights and insults that can cause potentially harmful or unpleasant psychological impacts on the target person or group. It is a subtle form of aggression that often works against historically marginalized social groups. Microaggressions against gender involve everyday acts that send subtle messages about one's supposed inabilities and roles because of gender. Some effects of microaggression include internalized emotions such as guilt, resentment, anger, as well as a negative implication on relationships. Microaggression is also a form of social control. Examples of microaggression include instances in which boys are teased for engaging in culturally feminine activities such as playing house or playing with dolls. Girls are teased for engaging in sports. Men are told to man up if they need to be tougher. Women are admonished or ostracized when they are too ambitious. Thus, bakla, or term for homosexual male, is used to berate and control men's behavior. The statement, para kang babae, when used to on men, is used to challenge masculinity and to show that being woman-like is bad, thus demeaning women as a gender. Although seemingly harmless, these instances are a form of correction that ensures that people do not stray from the culture's definition of the good. In this case, men as strong and masculine is considered good and men as feminine is bad. Below is a typical situation to illustrate this case. Sample case. Shan's group of all female friends make sexist jokes at the expense of women, stating that being a woman is a disability and that women are less logical than men. He shared that while he himself is pro women and a feminist ally, he gets pressured into making these jokes to bond with his blockmates. This picture is similar to what is called the Boys Club, that uses banter to marginalize women to keep its power and inadvertently reminds women that they are only allowed in certain spaces. Violations of this space merit reprimand through jokes that are essentially sexist and hurtful. This form of control can be understood as violent because it curtails individual freedoms by limiting people in narrow definitions that may not contribute to human flourishing. However, those who commit acts of microaggression do not in any way feel that they have violated the rights of others because they are acting according to the good defined by their culture. Often, they cannot understand the world according to any other reasoning. It shows how culture can determine the way we act toward others and ourselves without even a critical awareness of what we do and why we do it. In the realm of women and their rights, this scenario illustrates the necessity for critical reflection. At present, there is an awareness that women are unfairly treated in society, such that their human flourishing, even their basic survival as human beings, is threatened. Thus, everyone has to take a closer look at the culture and systems that define social structures in order to bring about genuine development to all the people of the world, especially oppressed women. How cultures get in the way of supporting and the flourishing of women should be understood. Cultural systems should be reflected on. It is difficult to change culture. The way they value or disvalue things. Humans are born into their ways of thinking. Sexist or misogynist thinking is inherited, which is why sexist jokes or harassment come so naturally to come to some. And so, we must ask ourselves how to transform destructive ways of existing. One important way is by consensually proposing universal standards by which societies can be measured. Ideally, these universal standards are put forward by international bodies such as the United Nations. If the people of the world can understand that there are certain benchmarks of humane and just behavior, then nations and their governments should be criticized and held accountable for violating universally agreed upon rules. Today, with regard to human beings in general, and women in particular, there are two such universal standards. One is already accepted by most countries, and another is being proposed by philosophers, especially for her advocacy of women's rights.